Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Continue reading from Srila Prabhupada, your ever well wisher. Although he was sometimes disturbed by the workers hammering, he found the atmosphere otherwise peaceful. The devotees living in the building with Prabhupada consider themselves menial servants in Prabhupada's personal house. Of course, all the buildings in ISKCON belong to Prabhupada, yet in Mayapur that sense was intensified. Generally, devotees in each particular center would raise funds to support their center, but Prabhupada personally took charge of getting funds for Mayapur. He had begun a Mayapur Vrindavan trust fund of donations from his disciples and interest from bonds and security deposits. If money was misspent, energy misused, or the buildings damaged in any way, Prabhupada would become very concerned. Now that he was personally on the scene, he often walked about, giving detailed instructions and demanding that discrepancies be corrected. The pink and reddish building was like a huge transcendental ship, and Srila Prabhupada as captain would walk the wide verandas, giving strict orders to all mates for keeping everything ship-shape. Prabhupada felt affection and deep gratitude for those devotees dedicating their lives to the Mayapur project. One night he called Bhavananda to his room and began asking him about the devotees. Suddenly Prabhupada began crying. "I know it is difficult for all you Western boys and girls," he said. "You are so dedicated serving here in my mission. I know you cannot even get prasadam. When I think that you cannot even get milk, and that you have given up your opulent life to come here, and you do not complain, I am very much indebted to all of you." This is Bhavananda speaking. The marble workers lived in some chatai houses right near the construction site. There was a hand pump just outside the building, and that's where we took our bath, and where the workers got water for the cement. Some distance off were 2 toilets, one for the men, one for the women. It was just 2 holes in the ground, and each hole surrounded by a chatai wall. The storms and the rain would come, and we would have to sludge to the mud in the fields to go to the toilets. There were snakes all over the place. It was wild. It was a construction site. No one lives in a construction site. But we did. Srila Prabhupada made us move here. It was good for us. No bathrooms, nothing. Just open floors with concrete. Srila Prabhupada ki. Antakoti Vaishnavrinda ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continue reading from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 16, entitled King Chitraketu Meets the Lord, and this is text 8. Is that correct? Evam Yoni Gato Jivaha Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Sa Nityo Nirahankrita Sa Nityo Nirahankrita Yavad Yatro Palabhyata Yavad Yatra Palobhyeta Tavat Svatam Hi Tasya Tat Tavat Satvam Hitasya Tat Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Sanicho Nirahankrita Yavajatropalapyeta Tavat Satvam Hitasya Tat Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Sanicho Nirahankrita Yavajatropalapyeta Tavat Sattvam Hitasyatat Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Sanicho Nirahankrita Yavat Palabhyeta Tavat Sattvam Hitasyatat Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Sanicho Nirahankrita Tavat Sattvam Hitasyatat Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Ankita Yavat Palabhyeta Avisatvam Mitasitat Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Sanicho Nirankita Yavajacho Palabhyeta Avisatvam Mitasitat Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Sanicho Nirankita Avijatra Palojata Avisatvam Mitasitat Evam Yoni Gato Jiva Jonirankita Yavajatra Palabhyeta Avisat Evam. Thus, Unigataha, being with a specific species of life. Jivaha, the living entity. Sa, he, Nitya, eternal. Nirahankritaha, without identification with the body. Yavat, as long as. Yatra, where. Upalabhyata, he may be found. Tavat, that long. Svatvam, the concept of self. He, indeed. Tasya, of him. Tat, that. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of a relationship based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal. Actually, it is not the body that is born or lost. Actually, it is the body that is born or lost, not the living entity. One should not accept that the living entity takes birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called fathers and mothers. As long as he appears as a son of a certain father and mother, as a result of his past fruitive activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus he falsely accepts himself as their son and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, one should not be falsely involved with jubilation and lamentation. Responsibly, please. Even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of a relationship based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal. Actually, it is the body that is born or lost, not the living entity. One should not accept that the living entity takes birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called fathers and mothers. As long as he appears as the son of a certain father and mother, as a result of his past fruitive activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus he falsely accepts himself as their son and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, One should not be falsely involved with jubilation and lamentation. Purport. When a living entity lives within the material body, he falsely thinks that he is the body, although actually he is not. His relationship with his body and his so-called father and mother are false, illusory conceptions. These illusions continue as long as one is not enlightened about the situation of the living entity. Om Jnanatamrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmritam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gramayam Daranti Sampatantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sargajatam Sargana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sargana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinobandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Haripriye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vinepacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I humbly seek the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas that I'm able to say some words of relevance and use to the text so we can um, gradually, at least for myself, begin to. There's a phrase, Shastra Chakshush, see through the eyes of Scripture, and this is the goal that we make Scripture our very life and soul. Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it's through this medium that we then see the world instead of the medium of our own mind and senses. So here we have, we're continuing the instructions given by Harsha Shoka, the son of Maharaj Chitraketu. He's been brought back to life by the mystic potency of Narada Muni. He's instructing his father about the temporary nature, temporary and illusory nature of all these material relationships. It is quite interesting, the dynamic of a son instructing his father. I guess when the father has seen the son come back from the dead, maybe the relationship changes slightly. So this is a sort of a verse that's quite clear about the temporary and illusory nature of so-called relationships based upon bodily identity, because although the body exists for some time, it is perishable. Therefore, the relationships that exist purely upon bodily identification are also perishable, and in the sense that they have no real substance. This concept that, it's funny, oftentimes parents feel some pride that they've some children. In the Western countries, most children are a result of their Varna Shankara, like they're simply a result of some sex desire at some point. And of course, there's sort of physical events, and 9 months later, a child is born. There's nothing actually that the parents are so they don't really do themselves, but nonetheless, they feel some pride that this is their creation. And this is the illusion we get thrown into by the external energy. So this is the potency of Shastra is that it changes this vision. It's very interesting. I find we can go in this quite often when we're out on Sankirtan, we can tell someone that they're not the body. And if someone who's say, a little bit spiritual open, they're very much happy to accept this. Yeah, I'm not the body, yeah, that makes sense. But you wonder how many people are actually living on the realization that they're not the body. Because it's only really devotees who you hear who are actually constantly talking about this. Even other spiritual paths, they might have some conception, but it's not such a forefront. Whereas for Prabhupada's movement, it's like the first thing you learn, and it's constantly repeated. And still, as devotees, it's not like all of us are living on the purely transcendental platform. Personally speaking, very much still on the bodily platform, and perhaps more painstakingly aware of how much I'm on the bodily platform, because it's emphasized so much. This is the difference between some sort of information some people have picked up. They think, oh, I've just collected these facts, I'm not the body, etc. Versus deep understanding, which actually changes the way that you live your life. And so this is the potency of Shastra. We're hearing recently from Kesha Maharaj that there's 4 principles of religion, and in Kali Yuga, all that's remaining is truth. There's no austerity, there's no cleanliness, there's no mercy. But somehow truth is the last remaining leg. It seems very confusing because dishonesty and lies are very much abundant in Kali Yuga. He was explaining that the truth remains because Prabhupada's books are here. And Prabhupada's books are being distributed, and these actually give the understanding which can free one from just this deep-rooted illusion. Therefore, we have to cultivate a relationship with Shastra. There's different described when we try and approach Shastra in the mode of passion. We seek to glean things from it, which sloka we can use. And so oftentimes I have this mentality, someone's giving class, I'm thinking, oh, that's a nice point, I could use that myself. Or we're trying to take something from the Shastra. And this is good in one sense because we're associating with Prabhupada's books, etc. Higher than this, the mode of goodness is actually to associate with the Shastra, to be absorbed in the pastimes. This requires purification and also developing a relationship. This is similar with, the holy name. The holy name is a process of purification, like Chettardarpanam Marjanam, that cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years of material life. But nonetheless, so it purifies us. But when we also come to a purified platform, we still also continue to chant Hare Krishna. The residents of Vrindavan still chant Hare Krishna because this is a perfection of spiritual life. So it's simultaneously the means and the end. And it's similar with Shastra, that we, right from the start, we're encouraged to, study Srila Prabhupada's books. But I've heard it said there's one senior devotee was asked how it is that he studies Prabhupada's books. How does he read? And he says, I don't read, I don't study, I relish. So he's come to this purified platform where it's no longer such like an arduous task or trying to assimilate knowledge or anything. It's simply a relishing of the transcendental literature. Because personally, I have this conception, okay, like I'm living my normal life, and then for maybe some time in the day, I will try and get absorbed in Prabhupada's books, And it's like a tiny little glimpse. But for these more advanced devotees, it's the other way around. The books like Srimad Bhagavatam is actually their reality, and then for maybe a little part of the day, they have to do some other bodily chores, etc. But even still, their consciousness is very much in Bhagavatam. You're flipping the switch, and it's similar to you hear these. There's all these beautiful paintings in the temple and described as portals to the spiritual world, and I think, well, that's very nice. Those paintings, but then I have one devotee describing how He was pointing to the other windows, these. He says, these are illusory. These are temporary, whereas these are actual, genuine windows. And it's that vision that we need to have, and that comes about just through constant association with Shastra. But like any relationship, it's work has to be put into that relationship to develop. Oftentimes in the West, there's sort of, this sort of love at first sight, and then it's love at first sight, and then divorce at first sight. Because there's not so much work put into that relationship, therefore it never actually yields the proper fruits. Whereas if we're willing to dedicate ourselves to Shastra, then we gain more and more insights and realizations. Many devotees talk about when they distribute Prabhupada's books and the books become alive. It's very, very much true. You can feel Prabhupada speaking to you directly from the purports. Yeah, it's, I guess, some points for how we can develop this relationship with Shastra. There's, I think, 6 items of surrender are mentioned in the Madhya Lila. I can only remember the Sanskrit for the first 2. It's Anukulyasya Varjanam Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Varjanam. Accept what is favourable for devotional service, reject what is unfavourable. And then the other aspects are to know that Krishna is your only protector, to understand that no one but Krishna is the supreme controller and the maintainer, to fully surrender, to be a fully self-surrendered soul, and to be meek and humble. These are the 6 aspects of surrender. And so all of these are very much important when we're approaching Shastra, because Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna. It is one of the forms in which he comes. We approach the deities with much awe and reverence and respect. And similar, that has to be there with Shastra. So if we go through these aspects of surrender, then, accepting what is favourable, developing a relationship, we have to primarily make time. Any relationship we have, if you put time into it, then it breeds some results. It's described that even in a material sense, you're the sum of the 6 people you spend the most amount of time with, or something. There's some statistic like this. So if you just actually spend time with Shastra every day, this has some effect. Then similarly, we have to reject what is unfavourable. It's described in one of the final verses in Bhagavatam, in the 12th canto, that this is the ripened fruit of all Vedanta. This is the ripened fruit of all Vedanta. One who has tasted the nectarian mellows. There is no desire for any other mundane literature. And so, similarly, as if we're in a relationship with, another human being, if it's a romantic relationship, it's very much not favourable to then also be engaged in other romantic relationships at the same time. Typically, this is, I know in perhaps Vedic system, a man can have more than one wife, but it's seen as somewhat, in a typical relationship, is somewhat devious or deceitful if you're engaging in multiple different relationships. And similarly with Shastra, we have to make it the priority. We can't go around reading, absorbing our consciousness in mundane literatures, because there's no way that we're going to become attracted to Krishna if we do so. Dr. Prabhu gives a nice analogy. He says that you have some sticky tape and you drag it through the dust or the dirt, and then the sticky tape loses its stickiness and can no longer be stuck to Krishna. This, our consciousness, we drag it through all these mundane things, then it loses its potency to be attracted to Krishna. So we have to very much reject anything which is going to prohibit our ability to be absorbed in Shastra. Yeah, and then comes these aspects of self-surrender as well. We have to, when we begin to read Bhagavatam, it raises so many like intellectual challenges, etc. It's not just an easy sitting, but there comes a point where you have to sort of realize, okay, I'm taking knowledge here from a transcendental source, and therefore it's not going to make sense to uh, my limited cognition. We've already accepted so many things as ordinary, but it's all just there's no reason why we should accept anything as ordinary. Why is the sky blue? Why are we floating on a rock in space? These are things everybody else accepts, we also accept. And so we read Shastra and it challenges these preconceived ideas and these notions. And this can cause some people to reject or to shy away from it, because if something's too challenging, they don't want to go there. But if we have firm faith that Krishna in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam is our only protector and is our maintainer, then we know this is actually what's good for us, because it shakes up all these, preconceived notions that are holding us back from devotional service. And it is quite remarkable, actually. I remember, when we engage in the process of sadhana bhakti, the purification comes. We're more willing to accept what we hear from Shastra. And then so I'm having these reflections when previously I remember reading some statements in the Gita, or perhaps other statements in the Bhagavatam regarding perhaps, Vedic cosmology or something before. I was just like shut down and I knew that I knew Krishna, okay, Krishna's God, but all this other stuff, I'm just gonna ignore it, because it would quite upset me quite a lot, because there are so many intellectual blockages, etc. Whereas now I have a lot more freedom. Well, who am I to say it's not, And so I can see how this process of purification and of associating with Shastra, it does bring about some realizations. It's not like my faith is just, completely firm and staunch, etc. But I'm just more willing to accept it. I can see the hypocrisy that would be adamant in me if I don't accept it, because there's one. I always like this quote. Jesus says, "Those who are with me, those who are not with me are against me." And so it's like if we're not accepting like the descriptions that are given in Bhagavatam, then we're simply accepting either descriptions that we're coming up with our own concocted mind, or simply the general understanding given by materialistic, atheistic society at the current minute. There's one quote I had a senior devotee saying that those who are accepted as normal now accept the the rules and conventions of a mad society. It's true. So we cannot remain neutral. It's very difficult to remain neutral. We're either in line with what Prabhupada's given, or we're against it in a sense. So we have to pick our sides, and it's not that we have to give up intellectual reasoning and things. Very much we've been given an intellect and we have to utilize them, but we also have to trust that there does come a leap of faith at some point, and then the intellect can catch up later. It always does. Yeah, and the final aspect of surrender is to be meek and humble. And this is very important in regards to Shastra as well. This Bhagavatam is described, the first two cantos are Krishna's lotus feet, and then it gradually moves up. And sometimes when you take darshan of the deity, you don't just, walk straight into the temple, walk straight up to the altar, and then, look at the beautiful deities right directly in the face. First of all, we come in, we offer obeisances. We offer obeisances to our spiritual master. And then gradually we take darshan, we look at Krishna's lotus feet, we look at the lotus feet of Sri Shikudnitai, Mahaprashashi. And slowly you work the way up before looking at the beautiful smiling face. And this is a great sign of respect. So many people, they they want to go straight to understanding rasa without understanding tattva, and this is a big no-no, because although rasa may be somewhat attractive, if there's not a strong enough foundation in the tattva, then the rasa, it will not be sustainable by any means, and it will lead to perhaps uh, becoming sahaja, or becoming he's very confused in some senses, and this is why, particularly the first two cantos of Bhagavatam, they make so explicitly clear Krishna's um, status is the source of everything. How the universal creation is manifesting, etc. And we understand all these things before we come to understanding more the rasic parts of the Bhagavatam. There's a famous example of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. He's going on parikrama in Vrindavan, and all these devotees are desperate to come hear about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan in the 10th canto. And so he's giving Bhagavat Katha for a month, and they're all very excited, and then he just speaks on this first verse of Bhagavatam for 30 days, because unless we have the tattva, then it can't sustain us. But then I always find it raises the question. It's like, okay, we do it as what we're told. We first will read Srimad Bhagavad Gita, then we progress to Bhagavatam. We work through all the cantos before we get to the 10th canto. But nonetheless, that's not such a long process. If you're keen, you can do it in like a year or less. And then so by that time, it's not that the tattva is firmly established. You've already read, okay, you have some understanding that Krishna is the source of everything, Krishna's Supreme Personality Body, Krishna's never contaminated by the modes of material nature, etc. But nonetheless, you still think you're the body. You still got, I find personally, still very much full of, mundane material desires, lust, etc. So how come we can then approach, these the more confidential aspects of the Srimad Bhagavatam? And I was meditating upon this and sort of thinking, because previously I maybe conceived, okay, maybe I should just keep reading the first two cantos till I become, much free from all these desires, etc., and more firmly fixed in my devotional service. And devotees who told me, no, just read, just read. And I'm very much glad they told me this, because, I begin to realize that although you can read through Bhagavatam, like the general progression of understanding, like crush Krishna's lotus feet and then moving up when taking darshan, this takes place over a long time. Like it's described that just by just by reading one word of Prabhupada's purports, you can get full realization. Because everything's contained in these words, it's mystical, But by associating with Bhagavatam, this purification is happening. So Bhagavatam doesn't reveal itself; it reciprocates, with us, and it reveals accordingly. So as long as we're careful and we're always having in this mood of humility and meekness and respect, then we'll remain safe. Prabhupada's protecting us by his purpose. He's guiding us. In anything in life, you always need a guide, and Prabhupada is definitely the guide to the Bhagavatam. And so if we remain under his shelter and just constantly associating with it, then slowly it will reveal itself more and more. There's one verse we recite oftentimes before Bhagavatam class. Nashtabadish. What's the verse? By regular recitation, regular study of Srimad Bhagavatam, and a service unto the pure devotees. It's just going through my head. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Tamash Loke. Bhakti Bhagavati Naishtoke. Yeah, by regular attendance in class in Srimad Bhagavatam, and by rendering service to the pure devotees, and nearly all that is troublesome with the heart is removed, and devotional service unto Sri Krishna and Supreme Personality of Godhead is understood as placed as an irrevocable fact. And so this is just like the yeah, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya has to be a constant thing. The analogy is given like the little drop of water on the stone over time. It erodes all these things till we can come to the point where no longer do we study Bhagavatam, but we relish it. No longer do we have to try and enter into, the world as described in Bhagavatam, but that is our consciousness, and we have to actually occasionally leave that. The mindset changes. Sanatana Goswami says, Bhagavatam is, is my life, is my guru, is my only friend, and this should be our meditation as well. Bhagavatam is our only friend. It's very nice. It's complete dependence upon it, because you see it's different now. Like, we have so many copies of Srimad Bhagavatam. Like, everyone has their own personal copy, then they have it maybe perhaps all in 10 volumes in one, and then they have on their phone and on their Kindle, and then we have Veda-based online, etc. Bhagavatam's everywhere. Whereas like the pastime of Sanatana Goswami, he has a dream that some Brahmana comes to his door, presents him with Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's just so over the moon, because and books were not so common. These, they would have to be copied out by hand, etc. These books are very, very, very rare. And so he has this dream that someone presents Bhagavatam to him, and then he wakes up. No one presented Bhagavatam, so he's distraught. And then later, the Brahmana does come to the door and gives him Bhagavatam, and he's just completely absorbed in it, And we have to have this, although perhaps we can think, well, it's just Srimad Bhagavatam, there's hundreds of copies, etc. We have to understand that what we have here is just so rare, because this knowledge, frees one from, as described here, all these illusory conceptions of understanding a true identity. And actually, Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the Amala Purana, it only describes pure devotional service, nothing else. All cheating religion, Kaivalya Dharma, is thrown away. This is simply pure devotional service. The other Vedic literatures, they're perhaps dealing more with karma kanda, etc. They're elevating people, but they're not giving directly Krishna. People are not ready for that. It's like it's described that they have to give a child some medicine, then you put the medicine in some sweet, like you give some sugar at the same time. And the sweet is like the materialistic rewards that come from doing pious karmakandic activities. It's like you offer this sacrifice, and then you get nice wives. The nice wife is a sweet, but actually performing sacrifice into Lord Vishnu, etc. is the purificatory process. Bhagavatam has none of this. Bhagavatam is just pure devotional service, right from the first verse to the last verse. We have to come to after constantly being absorbed in it, being purified by it, etc., then we can realize, that's what Bhagavatam is speaking about the whole way through. Bhagavatam reveals itself according to our surrender unto it. So, I humbly seek the blessings of the devotees that I may be able to begin to become absorbed in Bhagavatam. I'll perhaps stop you if there's any comments or questions.
Just keep it on hand for any, not for any, it's not as if, it's definitely going to happen where we lose some friend or family member. And this is a really good reminder for us in these circumstances. What is the actual philosophical position of these relationships? Of course, sometimes devotees become too philosophical, where they become quite cold or insensitive. So I wonder if you could say something about how to deal with people who maybe have experienced some bereavement, and rather than just being coldly philosophical about it and heartless, and also not just being falsely or not just getting absorbed in sentimentality, what would be a good balance?
So thank you. It's a very nice question. I don't know if it's so clear an answer, but I just remember there's one pastime, um, like one is it disciple of Mahaprabhu. He comes and he says, he's grihasta. He says, my wife has died, and I forget all the details. But I've felt no emotion. I'm ready for sannyas. You give me sannyas. He's like, no, go home, cry, cry first. I forget the details of this pastime. But basically, the essence is that the goal of spirituality is to make your heart melt, really. And although we can understand the deeper philosophical implications, okay, this person is a temporary material body, the death is inevitable, this relationship is temporary, etc. Nonetheless, we can very much we still feel the pain that others are feeling, and we feel the pain that others are feeling, and we understand that they're feeling this pain because they're looking for an eternal relationship, and just because they're somewhat limited in knowledge right now, we should never be, condescending, etc. And so just by trying to be some emotional support, then they may come to the stage where it's very interesting actually. Although like modern society is becoming more and more atheistic, etc., the churches still get a lot of income from doing funerals, primarily from people who never even went to church, because they still feel this need of, okay, it needs to be done. Weddings and funerals, they need to have some sort of religious aspect to them. People, they sort of, although they try and deny so much of these spiritual aspects in their life, they still have this subtle little sense, okay, hang on a sec, maybe these guys do know what they're talking about a little bit. I'm not going to get involved, but maybe they. And so similarly, people often, if we're engaged in spiritual life, they will approach us asking, questions and etc. And if we can be just, caring, compassionate, then they're more likely to come to us. And then later at the stage, they might be ready to hear a little bit more about some of the philosophy. But I'd appreciate what you could share in this, Prabhu, because I'm not so. My heart's quite hard.
I think what you said was good. So Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita, that we should follow our nature. What can repression accomplish? So if there's some kind of lamentation there, then we should do that. Like Lakshmana says, go grieve, do that first. That is natural. And then the next step, because otherwise we take, like the person would have taken sannyas prematurely without really letting go of that, and then it would have came later on. We can't really philosophize of how we're going to feel when these things happen. We can, for years, we can, in our mind, convince ourselves that we're not the body, we're spirit, soul, relatives, that we don't have mums, dads, brothers, sisters, we're all just jivas. We can do that, but at the same time, just we don't want to brainwash ourselves into having no feelings. And my personal experience is that you don't know what you're going to feel until you feel it. And there's a connection there. There should be some gratitude. Like, for example, our parents, they brought us up from day one, taught everything to survive basically in this world. We have a debt to them, and we should have some gratitude. And for people who have helped you, then there should be some gratitude, and therefore there's some sense of loss. Yeah, so it's important to not deny I think with grieving, one of the or any kind of trauma, one of the first things is denying. Right, when people are diagnosed with some terminal disease, then the doctors are quite blunt about it because they want to help people to get over the deniability side of it. They're quite blunt with it, so the person's not thinking, oh, maybe this, maybe not. And even with Vaishnavas, that's there in the Shastra, that it's stated in, I think, the fourth canto, that when the spiritual master leaves, then the devotee should cry. So, in other words, it's permitted, it's expected, the devotee would really feel that loss. Or any other Vaishnava, especially if we know them, and let the feelings have their place, and then we can be philosophical about it. When Srila Prabhupada passed, then his disciples were feeling great loss. It took some quite some time before they could get on their feet. But it helps to understand this philosophy. It's just like training for the marathon. Then we don't just wait till the day of the marathon and then deal with it. We prepare for it. So we prepare for our own past. We preparing for that also means preparing for the acceptance that other people will come and go.
Yeah, I guess the spiritual world is a very emotional place, and so this is described as a training ground. If we spend this whole lifetime trying to become like a stone, then we might feel a little bit of a place back there, Yeah, and I guess is where this, when you feel emotion, then you see for materialistic people, they can be overwhelmed by emotion for for the rest of their life. Someone, perhaps a partner dies, and then that's their life over. Maybe perhaps for a devotee, they feel this emotion, but then there's also some attachment, and they can move on with service, etc. It's not like they limit any emotions, but they just in context as well, perhaps.
It's also on your level of advancement. There was an interesting story. There was one time in Vrindavan, there was some big arrangement going on for the cremation of a child of a young devotee couple. The child had passed away untimely. So there were some big arrangements going on, and of course the mother and father were very morose, etc. And one rickshawwala, he didn't know it was the person he was talking. He didn't know it was his child that died. He says, "What's happening here?" And they said, "Oh, my daughter. She was only 3-year-old. She passed away." And then the rickshawwala had a big smile on his face, and he says, "So what's the problem? I also lost a child, same age." He says, "But you're in Krishna's dham. Child goes back to Godhead. It's glorious." So he had a natural, very positive spiritual, very deep spiritual outlook. He wasn't getting caught up in lamentation. He said, Krishna gives for some time, and then Krishna takes by his own sweet will in his time. Of course, we don't know what he was experiencing at the very time when it happened, though.
There's a nice verse from the Gita: "Those who see with the vision of eternity." It's good that you have to develop that vision.
Yeah, I guess the thing is we shouldn't fake it. If it's natural, it's deep, and it's real, and we have that realization, but just to parrot fashion say some slokas that we've heard, then that's when it would come over as being callous. You should live according to a realization. Just like in the material world, people, if they live according to their means, then it's realistic. So if we speak according to our realizations, that's a similar type of realistic platform.
Granta Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Thai Gaur Premanandi.